Hey everybody, we are talking about the immune system specific and non-specific defenses, and we want to understand how the immune system actually protects us from disease. And so we're going to start off by talking about our non-specific defenses. You guys watched this video prior to this lecture, and this goes into both of them, although it doesn't really break them apart, but it really demonstrates how these two things work together to protect us from illness. So the reason we call these things non-specific defenses is just because they don't change how they actually attack or prevent pathogens from infecting us. So there's no change. So for any type of pathogen, whether it's a parasite or bacteria or virus, they do the same things. And basically, those two things are first line of defense, and they are our physical and chemical barriers. And they do exactly that. They basically are a barrier for pathogens getting in. The skin, mucus, and mucous membranes basically just are like a wall. You can't get through. And they're very effective at what they do unless they are compromised. Your chemical barriers are things like your mucus, sweat, and tears, and they're going to have enzymes in them that actually attack and destroy those pathogens. So if you get something in your eye, you automatically start crying. One of the reasons for that is because whatever's in there might carry, bacteria or even a virus. And so your tears have that enzyme that attacks and destroys that pathogen. They're very effective, but sometimes they do fail. And sometimes they also get broken. And so sometimes we get cuts and we get things that break through our skin. And if that happens, we move to our second line of defense, the inflammatory response. This is also non-specific because it's the exact same no matter what pathogen enters in through the cut. But it's usually a reaction to some type of tissue damage. And it's got three big purposes for it. Whenever our skin gets violated or broken, a chemical signal basically activates the inflammatory response. And what happens is that chemical signal will activate the dilation of capillaries. And when that happens, a bunch of fluid comes to the area, and it will dilute any toxins that came in with the whatever broke through the skin and or what is being created by the bacteria or virus. The second thing that it'll do is it brings in macrophages into the area, which will go ahead and start trying to attack and eat any pathogen that's gotten into our system. In the video, you saw that sometimes it can be effective and be enough to stop the infection. Sometimes it isn't. So for most cases, if it is enough, then basically a bunch of oxygen is brought to the area, which then helps those macrophages do what they're supposed to do and also helps healing. So these are those three big things that the inflammatory response does. It's very important that you know these three things. Now, getting into our specific defenses, the reason why we call these specific is because they change depending on what pathogen is actually in your system. So your specific defenses actually recognize what type of a pathogen it is, and you saw that in the video. It can recognize, is it bacteria, is it a virus, and then it will have a different attack depending upon that. The things involved in our specific defenses are our lymphocytes, which are our white blood vessels, and we have two main types, T cells and B cells. B cells are very specific, and they do basically two things. One, they turn into memory cells, and then two, they turn into what we call plasma cells, which are going to produce antibodies. Your T cells they're either the killer cells, or they're also our helper T cells, which actually activate our immune system. So an overview of this is that when our pathogen actually gets into our immune system, this is when it goes to work. Okay, so the first thing that happens is, again, all pathogens have proteins on them, and we call these proteins antigens. They help our immune system recognize these. Now, your normal cells don't recognize those antigens as on a pathogen. They think that it's something friendly, but your immune system does recognize these. And so what your immune system will do is it will use those antigens to mount its very specific attack towards the pathogen. Like I was talking about earlier, T cells, we have kind of three different types. We have our killer T cell, they kill stuff. We got our helper T cell, they activate our B cells and the rest of our immune system. And then we also have a suppressor T cell, which kind of turns the immune system off once the infection is taken care of. Your B cells, like I said, into two different types. You got plasma and memory cells. Plasma cells generate those antibodies, and antibodies are proteins that attach to pathogens, basically rendering them useless and flagging it for destruction. Memory cells are how your immune system remembers how to attack specific viruses or bacteria. So once we have memory cells, we're basically immune to ever getting infected by this type of pathogen again. Okay, so here's how it works. Pathogen comes in and infects you. Killer T cells start killing it because it shouldn't be there. So they go to work, and then we have these things called dendritic cells. They go through and they eat up the bits and pieces of those dead pathogens. And basically what they're going to do is then they're going to bring that antigen to the lymph node. Now, important to understand, we might think, well, the killer T cells are killing it, so shouldn't that be enough? And the answer is no. Oftentimes, the viruses are too efficient for the killer T cells to really be able to have much of an effect. And so we need the rest of our immune system to be active. So dendritic cell goes to a lymph node, and it's going to activate a very specific helper T cell, which then will activate a B cell. And once that B cell is activated, it splits into two different types, into the plasma and the memory. Memory is just going to kind of continue to divide, and the plasma cells will obviously continue to be created, but they're going to start vomiting out tons of antibodies. Those antibodies go directly to the sites all throughout the body, and they're going to basically smother the virus, and those proteins attach on to the virus, basically rendering them unable to infect any new cells. And also it tells our killer T cells in our immune system what to actually kill. And we gain immunity once we've destroyed the pathogen and we have those memory B cells roaming around our blood. And we also have antibodies that will continually roam our blood as well. And so basically, let's say you get infected by the exact same virus a week later. You may feel a little sick, but by the next day, you'll feel fine because your immune system destroyed it. All right, folks, and that is our immune system, our specific and non-specific defenses. Stay tuned, as the next one we're going to be talking about how we can activate our immune system without actually getting sick ourselves. See you next time.